Hi there. You're listening to A Founder's Life, and I'm your host, Leo Gestetner. My guests and myself share our entrepreneurial journey and our methods for a balanced life. And I'm joined here today by Ian Tenenbaum. Ian, thank you for joining us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks for having me. I currently am a coach for entrepreneurs with ADHD. I specialize in helping founders, entrepreneurs build a life of their dreams and overcome a lot of the challenges that come with ADHD, especially for entrepreneurs. And I came into this through a lifetime of entrepreneurial ventures, startups, building my own businesses, and at a later age, learning how much ADHD plays a role in our day-to-day work life and seeing an opportunity to help others. So happy to be here.
Thank you. Why don't you talk a little bit about your journey and what brought you here?
Yeah, so since a young age, I was somebody who was stereotypical ADHD. When I was a kid, it was ADD back in the 80s, 90s. And it wasn't considered such a serious, real thing like it is today. It was more of a joke, of a criticism, of a problem, but not something that was addressed, not something that had solutions. It was more, you're difficult, you're annoying, you're a problem child. So that comes with it a lot of stigma, a lot of shame, a lot of identity that develops. And it has a double-edged sword because I felt very creative, very ambitious, very smart, very brilliant at times. But I would also equally feel very stupid, incompetent, struggling. And the theme throughout my life was, you have so much potential if you would just XYZ. If you would just do the work, if you would just focus, if you would just follow through. So it always felt like this perpetual close to greatness, but couldn't get out of my own way. And anyone with ADHD knows exactly what I'm talking about. And there's this ongoing feeling like something's missing. I haven't figured out how to get myself together. And that started a lifetime of entrepreneurship, and I was always very ambitious, but I would move from one thing to the next. And then after a number of successes and a number of failures, late 30s, I went through a divorce. I ended up in and out of the hospital for about a year, having back surgeries. I couldn't work. So I had a lot of time to do a pretty significant amount of introspection and self-awareness. And most people don't, at 38 years old, go out of work for a full year and have all day, every day, like a month to work on themselves. So what I learned in that time was there was a lot that I was missing in terms of my own self-awareness, my own understanding of how ADHD is showing up, my own understanding of my habits. And it started this transformation process that was really profound, real dark night of the soul. And what I realized is most people who are not as fortunate to have such a catastrophe and have the world caving in on them, so they just keep going through life like with these problems, but I had to fix it because of my circumstances. It was so extreme. It's like people who drink a lot of alcohol, but if they're never an alcoholic, they don't actually fix the problem. They just kind of go through drinking a little too much all the time, right? But it's the ones who crash and hit bottom that go into AA and then transform their lives, right? So it felt like there was something missing where people shouldn't have to hit rock bottom to find solutions for these problems. And before I did, it wasn't in my awareness, right? So I realized there's not a lot out there helping people in business with these challenges in a proactive way before it gets too bad. And that's what kind of started me on this journey of, could I build a coaching program? Could it be a system? Could it be a framework? How do I develop something that fills this gap? And that's what I've been doing the last 2 years.
Sounds like a fun journey with a little bit in the middle that probably wasn't quite so fun, but
yeah.
Glad you
not fun looking back, but it's very true and cliche what they say is, those experiences in retrospect can be really invaluable, but in the time, you don't feel that way. And for some reason, I think I had studied enough people with stories like that and heard enough of that, that storyline, the hero's journey, all that. So I think there was something in me when things were at the darkest time that I said, oh, well, I feel like this is going to be one of those things I look back on in 10 years and am somehow grateful for. And that type of mindset, I think, is what helped me get through the darkest times with a positive outlook.
I think that also is what, I'm a big believer in these experiences are all what make us. So, you are today everything in the past, that the positive experiences, the negative experiences, it all adds into who you are and therefore is all needed. Otherwise you wouldn't be who you are.
Yeah, definitely.
And talking a bit about family, what's family look like for you?
So I have a son. I am remarried. So part of the journey was a divorce, which was incredibly difficult, incredibly painful, but also in many ways a catalyst for so much of this other real transformative things. Now I have a pretty awesome, beautiful blended family where me and my current wife have a fantastic relationship with my son's mom and stepdad. And the four of us operate as a unit. And when I went through the divorce, I studied things like, I think there was the trendy book, Conscious Uncoupling, and a lot of these different trendy concepts that wanted to reframe the narrative around a divorce or an evolution of a family or a blended family or all these things. And it really has been helpful as a guide to say, there's not one way this has to look, and you get to decide what it's going to look like. And now I have, a new baby on the way, and the transformation that all of this in the last few years with the ADHD and business has provided me, I think has been incredibly helpful for all of that. Being able to be a better parent, better partner, better co-parent. So there's a lot of overlap between these things, which is really interesting.
That you've got a good relationship with your ex as well. Sort of healthy. I think there's nothing sadder than the amount of friends I have who have a terrible relationship with their exes, but you're always going to be co-parents. So that makes that a really, really tough relationship. And in the end, it's tough on the kid.
Yeah, it has to be developed, out of love and care for the child, because that's the glue. Even in families where a brother and sister or two sisters or a mother and a daughter have a falling out, they can typically actually go separate ways for, if they're both adults. They kind of don't need to really, even though they're family, they could just not talk, right? When you're co-parenting with a young child, you can't just not, you have a relationship. And at an early stage, I think we both realized we want that to be pleasant. We want that to be constructive, and we want that to be positive and show a good influence and a good role model for our child.
Great that you're able to do that. I think it shows that you're both evolving in the right direction. And as you said, it's a positive influence on your son to show that can be done. And what does health look like for you? And health, I talk about, that can be fitness, can be mental health, can be nutrition in whatever form that takes for you.
Yeah, so this is also a thread in my journey, because when I was going through that transformation, dark night of the soul, and I had a series of back problems I had a surgery. I had to recover. I had another surgery. I had to recover. I had one of them got infected. So I was in and out of the hospital, emergency room, and in that time, I started to shift the priority in my mind from, business and success and ambition as one of the highest things to, and even my family, to my own personal health is the ultimate highest priority, because in that time, it really showed me that if my health is not where it needs to be, I am literally useless to my family, my son, my partner, all the people that depend on me. So while before that, I used to prioritize them and say, well, I'm fine. I need to make sure that, I'll come later, the classic martyrdom. I'll put myself second. So my child or but then I realized then if I am out of commission, if I can't move, if I'm on the bed, I can't lift my son, I can't work, I'm useless. So that's where, and it started actually, even though my physical health was the most suffering, it showed me how much our mental health is really, paramount. So because I had periods of months where I couldn't I was like, I had to lay in bed, I walked a few hours, but I had to rest, let it heal. I realized mental health is the one thing that no matter what happens to your body, it's there with you, right? At all times. And that became like my number one focus is my mental health, positive mindset, clarity, self-awareness. And that stuck with me through the years. Then next came the physical health. So being able to take care of my body, listen to it, recognize when something's off, it's a signal, maybe go back to physical therapy if I need something. I have a trainer. And then, from there comes then, diet, lifestyle, everything else.
Do you do anything like meditation, or do you visualizing?
Constantly.
What does that look like for you?
So I think of meditation not only as sitting in silence. When I wake up, I almost always start the day with some type of programming, I call it, like positive tracks. This morning I was listening to, I think, Neville Goddard, Neville Goddard, like classic people from, all different decades that have these, affirmations and tracks. So while I'm starting my day, I'm immediately filling my mind with that positive. Sometimes I'll sit in my office here and just take 5 or 10 minutes and stare out the window. Sometimes I actually do formal meditation where I'm sitting and, 5, 10, 20 minutes just in silence, guided meditations. So I feel like I've developed what feels like a toolkit, and I try to listen to my body and my mind and what I need in that moment. So it could be a certain day where I have 30 minutes and it feels like I need a guided meditation around overwhelm, and I'll go find one, put it on, listen. Sometimes there's just overstimulation throughout the day. And what I realize I need is to go sit outside with no sound, no music, and just stare into the clouds for 10 to 15 minutes and drink my water. So I think it's like, people try to identify, do you do this one or do you do that? Do you do this? Do you do that? I feel like these are all great tools. Like in the kitchen, you've got the pan, the pot. Nobody says, do you cook with a pan or a pot? You'd say, well, depends on what I'm cooking. So I feel like having a range of tools is really helpful. You can grab the right tool for the job.
Meditation, I mean, some people, meditation is about focus. For other people, it's actually about a lack of focus, a conscious lack of focus. I got into meditation about 10 years ago, and I did Headspace for a long time, which is a guided meditation, which I loved. I think it's a great way to
Sounds just like meditation.
Yeah, I've got a little more hair. The thing for me often these days, although I still do sort of sit down and meditate in that way most days, is I'll often go for a run, which is actually remarkably meditative for me. An hour, 2 hour run can actually allow me to switch off and meditate basically. So for me, that can work very well. What do you like to do for fun?
So I was talking to someone about this recently. There are a lot of things for fun. One of the things I am really happy about lately and proud of is that I've started building my life and my career around what is actually fun for me. So, talking to clients, creating these group programs, creating content, a lot of that stuff is just the fun stuff I've done my whole life. I've always been involved with media and technology, and I was making videos and producing little skits when I was in high school, putting them on the channel there. And in college, I went to school for TV and video, and after college worked in tech and startups. So the intersection of tech and media and production is all fun for me. I DJ a bit, I play electric drums. So having fun lately with how to create streaming, podcasts, cameras, lighting, that stuff's all fun for me. I like to do artwork. I haven't done as much lately. Painting has been one of my creative outlets. I lately have a lot of fun playing with all the new creative AI tools that are emerging. So just spending time with my son creating AI generated animation videos, or, editing stop motion Lego videos or things like that. And lately been playing with building businesses with my son. We made a car wash business last week and got neighbors to come by, and he was raking in the cash. And so I think a lot of these things, a lot of how I've been trying to design my life lately is finding ways to do for work what I actually enjoy and would likely be doing if I didn't have to work. So yeah, I feel like there's a nice blend there that I'm creating.
Can you stop working? Can you switch off?
Well, I think that's the interesting thing about the way I'm describing it is it doesn't feel like work. It's things I want to do and that are fun. And I do have a pretty healthy balance of downtime and schedule. So because I have my son half of the time, it allows, until my next child comes, a bit of a balanced schedule. And I spend a bit more time when I have him with him and separating from work, and more time out. So yeah, I feel like I can, when I'm not quote unquote working, I'm still often doing some things that could be related to my work, like playing with a new AI development tool that you could build an app. Oh, it's like, that's fun for me. So yeah, but I do work with a lot of clients who struggle with the compartmentalization or separating and being able to focus and be present. So I think one of the challenges a lot of us have is not necessarily if you can stop working, it's can you be present with whatever you're doing. So if I'm here talking to you, I should be present and in this conversation. If I'm at my son's school and I'm watching a recital, I should be present at that. If I'm with a client or so I think a lot of us struggle with whatever we're doing, our mind being somewhere else. So less about like looking at it like can you switch off or can you stop working? It's can you switch your mind off no matter what you're doing. I even have clients who, will be in one meeting, they're thinking of a different meeting. Or so can you be present in anything you're doing, I think is one of our biggest challenges right now.
Help guide them on that. What are your tricks to staying present in the moment?
Well, what I've learned over the years is one of the biggest factors in us constantly being pulled in other directions is a lack of control or organization, or feeling like there's something unsettled or open loops. So I'll give you an example. I used to, when I did a startup myself about 10 years ago, I used to have calls with my sister and tell her that at 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night, I felt like I couldn't stop my brain obsessing about all these things about the business, but yet at that time of the night, I'm not doing anything. I'm not working on it. And it felt like I couldn't let it go. And it was that classic problem. And she brought up a really great point. She said, well, can you look at everything going on in the business and see what you're not leaving in a good place or organized properly that has some open ends to it or things that are unresolved? And maybe you're just not leaving things organized enough so you can let go till tomorrow. And what I learned is a lot of us don't have certain things that are really important in a organized way. So, example, before we got on, I had to call the service providers coming to my house today, and I had to tell them that I'm getting a podcast, rearrange the schedule, make sure they weren't going to come while I'm on with you, right? So I can ignore that during our call because I know they're not coming right now. I've properly got that organized and handled. If I didn't make that call and I knew they were coming anywhere from now to the next 4 hours, our whole call, I would be, looking at my phone and wondering if they're going to show up, right? I would be totally distracted. So it took me that extra 5 minutes to be proactive and say, I want to get things organized in a way so when I get on with you, there's nothing I'm forgetting. And a lot of my clients have so many things that are open that are, oh, shoot. Oh, they're, I didn't get back. Oh, and then they stay with you. So the trick is, it's not an easy trick, is we go through things and say, okay, what do you need to do there so you can put it aside? Well, I really should get back to them and tell them I'm unavailable till tomorrow. Okay, great. Let's do that. What about this one? It's like, well, there's actually nothing for me to do there till Thursday. Okay, so that's good. So we don't have, so yeah, now that I'm going through it, there's actually not like, okay, let's set a reminder for Thursday and you don't have to think about it till Thursday now. Right. So it's, can you get things off your mind so you don't have so many open loops running? And a lot of us with ADHD struggle with that process, that thinking ahead, planning, organizing. So it's something we learn to just deal with all the time. Open tasks, open loops. And your mind is scanning for, what did I forget? What am I forgetting? What's today? What's tomorrow? And that's exhausting.
Yeah, I think my trick with that is writing things down. I have a terrible memory, but I'm pretty organized. And I think if I write it down, I can then stop thinking about it because I've then got the note. Otherwise, it's continuing to go in there and until I deal with this. Now, a question I often like asking, and I think you've really already answered it, but I'll throw it out there anyway, in case you've got something else you want to mention. But what has been a pivotal moment in your life, either personal or business?
What has been?
Yes.
Well, I've definitely answered one that we've talked a lot about as a transformation. I think the next pivotal moment was discovering this business and how it aligns with my talents, my strengths, my passions, what's needed, the classic ikigai, but maybe a little different, but close to it. So maybe I could even summarize it and say, discovering my ikigai after that transformation, after that dark night of the soul, after going back to several years at big global public companies in an executive position for several years, being able to go back to entrepreneurship, having reinvented and rebuilt myself and get into a business and see a vision for myself that's really aligned, that I think is the ultimate, right? Because so many of us are searching for something that we feel we could do for many years, that we won't get bored, that is in alignment with our strengths, that we're capable, that we're competent. And I've read a lot that we don't get confidence and are just from results. We get it from being good and talented at something and feeling like you're skilled and you've refined and you have some talents and capabilities. And I feel like now with this business, it's the first time in my life that I don't feel like every few weeks or every few months, I'm thinking about what I could do instead. And it's now been 2 years. So to me, I feel like I would love that for as many other people as possible.
It sounds like you've managed to do something which a lot of entrepreneurs are not the best at, which is find a pretty good balance. So if you look at a balanced life and you've got a pretty new business, but you're still managing to be pretty balanced, I like that, hidden away behind you. For me, I often say that, balance is not a permanent equilibrium. So balance might be at some point, perfectly doing, at some point it's more family. But it's finding that overall balance. It's not in one moment. It's an overall. How does that balanced life look for you?
Can you see that one too?
What's the second one?
If I'm wider, it's a adult swinging a child and having like one of those circus bars that balances it on a little pole.
Sure.
So you can spin it, and if you spin it too hard, it falls off. And this one is the classic pendulum balls. So yeah, you're touching. What'd you say?
Newton's cradle.
Newton's cradle. Yeah. So what you're touching on is probably one of the most challenging concepts and most difficult fundamental areas that I work on with clients is how can we cultivate and develop balance in so many ways, and what does that mean? What does that look like? And for us with ADHD, it's incredibly difficult because naturally, biologically, we develop a lot of extremes. There's time blindness, which people refer to as us viewing time as now or not now, very binary. We go all or nothing, 0 to 60, right? Can't motivate, and we're in analysis paralysis, or we are impulsive, right? So ADHD is synonymous in many ways with this imbalance, this wide-ranging polarity. And for us to be successful, one of the things I work on the most with clients is how do we develop that balance and cultivate the muscle so we don't have an on and off switch. We have a volume switch that can go 1, 2, 3, right? And that's not something that comes naturally for us. So it's something I've had to work on, and it's something I continue to work on, and it shows up in all areas. So I think just first acknowledging that it's harder for us at times with ADHD, trying to recognize where that comes through, and then work on the skills and the muscles to bring back from here, narrow the gap. My therapist referred to it as modulating. So when we worked together for a few years, she said, we've done a great job of moderating. So let's say I cut some of the extremes off the sides. So I moderated, wasn't as sad or depressed, wasn't as over, excited and wild. So we moderated, but we still needed to now work on modulating, being able to move fluidly through a good day, a bad day, a hard day, an exciting day. I'm really interested in this topic. I'm not as interested. And the more we can do that a little bit more fluid and smooth, we just have a much more calm nervous system.
I like that way of looking at it. Well, thank you. I think it's been a fun conversation. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about?
I think we've covered a lot. I think if anybody is struggling with ADHD in their business life and growing a business, reach out to me, and have a lot of different programs and free content and workshops, and happy to help.
And how can people find you?
My website is accountable.live, and you can find me on LinkedIn, Ian Tenenbaum, or on YouTube.
Thank you for joining today. And thank you for listening to the podcast today. And if you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, tell your friends, and leave a review. Thank you.